It is now 6:05 p.m. and it's my distinct honor and privilege to call to order the Town Council Workshop meeting of February 26, 2026 for the Town of Surfside Beach. Workshop agenda has no invocation, but please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much. The agenda today is devoted solely to the Resident Canada Goose information session offered by Clemson University Cooperative Extension Service, and no votes will be taken. Our primary purpose is to gather enough info to determine if any council action should be considered in future meetings. Unlike most workshop meetings, this features a Q&A with the experts, so at that point, public interaction is encouraged. Per our agenda template, public comments are permitted at a workshop meeting for town council consideration. The first session is anything you wish us to hear before the presentations, with a second session after we have completed the Q&A. Is there any public comment before the session starts? In that case, I'm going to turn it over to our guests from Clemson University Extension Service, and that's all yours now. And then, so I will just say, please hold the questions until the presentation is complete. Then you'll have a Q&A, and then again, you'll have a chance to talk to us.
Okay, so thank you all for coming out. All right, so this is kind of informal. This is our third Goose workshop, our first information session though, with the town of Surfside about resident Canada geese. So thank you all for coming out. My name is Catherine Watts. I'm the Water Resources Agent for Horry and Georgetown counties and the Coastal Waccamaw Stormwater Education Consortium Coordinator. So I work a lot with the municipalities, including this town of Surfside Beach, and their Stormwater Committee. So first, I'll give a brief overview of stormwater ponds and the water quality of stormwater ponds, and then I will hand it over to Tansy to talk about the Canada geese. So stormwater ponds, they're extremely important components of your community's drainage system. They serve two primary functions. One is to prevent community flooding, and two is to protect the water quality. So this is a profile view of a stormwater pond. If you notice the two pool volumes. So the permanent pool is the amount of water that is really always in the stormwater pond during normal conditions. So not during drought, not during a really heavy rain event, just average year-round capacity of that pond. And then the temporary pool is after rain events. You might notice, especially if you live on the pond, the volume of the pond, the water level rises about 1 to 2 foot. And that's because it is collecting all of the stormwater runoff from the surrounding land and directing it all into the stormwater pond. So it's easy to see how that would contribute to protecting the community from flooding. All of it's directed from the land into the pond. Well, protecting against water quality, the idea is that the water is temporarily held in this stormwater pond long enough that the pollutants are able to settle out of the water column before that water moves downstream. So downstream is wetlands, rivers, creeks, oceans, all of that. And we want the water to be as clean as possible before it moves on to those natural water bodies. All right. Here. So this is just a diagram of a stormwater drainage system in a community. So you see that the rain falls and it's directed into a series of ditches and underground pipes that's directed into a stormwater pond. So that's through storm drains, ditches, manholes, whatever. So the entire community, not just the people that live on the pond, they benefit. So this is a picture of Lake Dogwood, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. So not only the people that live directly on the pond receive the benefit, but really the entire community benefits from the flooding. And also, while the entire community benefits, the entire community also impacts the water quality of the pond. Because anything that's on the land, whenever it rains, it gets washed off. That water is directed to the stormwater pond. So some of the common pollutants that we see are just normal things that you might find in your yard. So we have nutrients, so that's excess fertilizer use. It's it's poop, so it's dog waste. It can be from wildlife waste, maybe Canada geese or waterfowl, if there is large populations of those. Yard waste, like grass clippings, leaves, any of that. Bacteria is another very common pollutant, so that really comes from poop. So that's dogs, and it could be a lot of geese. Litter, so that's just household garbage that might get taken away from your bin or something. Also yard debris. Chemicals, so that's fertilizer, pesticides, oils, greases, gas from your cars, household cleaning products, heavy metals, that's from your cars, so that's on your streets, driveways, all gets washed off. And then any sediment, any bare soil that's upstream of the pond, that is also a pollutant. So a lot of these pollutants, we can do something about. We can decrease our fertilizer use, we can pick up after our dogs, but a lot of it is also just living everyday life, just the reality of life, and using cars and these products. But whatever we do on land, it impacts the water quality. And it's not directly those that live on the pond, it's the entire community. So stormwater ponds, they are designed to capture stormwater runoff. And so stormwater runoff, it is inherently dirty because it has all of these things that are on the land. So stormwater ponds, they are supposed to be dirty, and it kind of sounds bad, but that goes back to their primary purpose of pollution reduction. Those pollutants should settle out of the water column. So they are supposed to be dirty, but we want as clean as water as we can get before it moves downstream. So today, whenever we're talking about Canada geese, we're really focusing on those nutrients and the bacteria levels. So stormwater ponds, again, flood protection, pollution reduction. They're not for recreational activities like fishing, swimming, or boating. And they're not just there to solely beautify the landscape, they're there for function. Of course, maintenance is critical, not just for the aesthetic value and protecting your property values, but also for the flood protection and the water quality protection. And aesthetic reasons, of course, if this was in your backyard, that wouldn't be great. So I get the question a lot of who is responsible for the stormwater ponds in our community. Town of Surfside Beach is a little bit different in that the town owns and manages all of the stormwater ponds in the town. Common stormwater pond problems, aquatic vegetation. So that's algae, any nuisance weeds or anything, and that a lot of times comes from excess nutrients. Shoreline erosion, aeration and circulation, nuisance wildlife, water quality, sedimentation, low high water levels, muddy water spills, storms. And so the QR code here, that takes you to fact sheets from Clemson that gives you information and resources on all of these things. Okay, so we'll save questions until the end. I will hand it off to Tansy, who will talk about Canada geese.
Good evening, everyone. I hope y'all can hear me online. My name is Tansy Belkin. I'm a Clemson Extension Forestry and Wildlife Agent. I've been with Extension for coming on 6 years now. Been working with wildlife kind of my whole life. Caught my first earthworm when I was 2 years old. Great moment. So we're gonna talk about Canada geese kind of as a whole, and like Catherine was mentioning, it's a multi-fold problem that they can pose. They don't always pose this problem, but in the right situations they can. Number one being our stormwater ponds. When we say they all drain downstream, what's downstream from Surfside? We're about the most downstream as you're gonna get until we get to the Atlantic Ocean. So one of the things that we do see periodically every year, not necessarily in Surfside, but South Carolina's coast, North Carolina's coast, Georgia, Florida, you name it, we get beach closures from things like bacteria overloads. And it can be from multiple different causes. A lot of it we do see from septic backup. A lot of it we do see from just life. But we're seeing increasingly, as we see these wildlife problems increase, a lot of it can be attributed to nutrient overload, poop overload, E. coli bacteria buildup from animals such as Canada geese. Couple other problems that they do pose, they're a safety hazard or can pose a safety hazard on airlines, airfields. It's called a BASH, bird airstrike hazard. Y'all remember the landing on the Hudson movie? When was that, 2005, 6, 7? Somewhere around there. That was a case of a bird strike. In this case, it was a Canada goose that brought down a commercial airliner. It was the best case scenario. Everybody survived. Made a movie out of it, high stress movie. But that's a real life danger that is posed when we have this human wildlife conflict. Couple other things that I think I'd go into erosion on here a little bit. Another one that we do see a lot in Surfside particularly is car hazards. You know, we never want to see roadkill. We never want to see wildlife getting killed on the roads. We don't want to see people interacting in that manner with it. We don't want there to be that conflict. So there are steps that we can take that will reduce the human-wildlife interaction. It's humans and wildlife don't always get along. And when we are put in forced close proximity to each other, it's like living with a wildcat. It's not a great time. So we're gonna talk about some different methods that we can take as a community, or that you can take as a community, that help to reduce that human-wildlife interaction as much. So first of all, when we talk about reducing that interaction, that slide got cut off just a little bit on the end, but we like to approach it from an integrated pest management solution, IPM. Anytime that we're talking about really any action that you can take in nature, I'm sorry, that's the best way I can think to put it. We kind of look at it from this triangle where you want to start as simple and as basic as possible and then work your way up in levels of intervention. So in this case, number one is going to be prevention. How can we prevent that conflict from happening from the very, very beginning? Through methods like cultural change, physical and mechanical control, and then there is biological control. In South Carolina, or actually, to my knowledge, nationwide, we do not have a chemical control option. We don't do that for a lot of our wildlife, besides maybe mice. But in this case tonight, and because it's my specialty, I don't go into the biological control, but the physical, mechanical, and the cultural are what we're talking about here tonight. This is what the community can start implementing tomorrow if you wanted to. And this is some of that. So the prevention, the cultural changes, things like human behavior and habitat, and then some physical and mechanical options being exclusion and harassment techniques to help move them along. So number one is behavior. People ask me all the time, what's the number, if you could do one thing, what is it? Leave wildlife wild. They don't need our help. They don't always want our help. They're animals, they'll take it when they can get it sometimes. But number one is don't feed them. They've got 2 legs, they've got 2 wings, they've got a beak, they hiss real loud. They can take care of themselves really well. They don't need us to feed them. They're able to hunt, forage, I guess it would be in their case, on their own.
Not all of them.
And a lot of the time the options that, you know, we being the collective give to them are not healthy. Things like bread, no nutritional value. For
That's
us,
the
it's already
vacationers.
very limited,
Yep.
as delicious as it is. I love me some carbs. The geese also do, unfortunately for
Obviously.
them, it is even worse. It can lead to several health issues, and that's when we see some of these bacteria
Yeah, girl.
overloads. And we end up seeing things like they don't eat all of it, and it gets washed down into our stormwater system, where that bread breaks down, and it's feeding that nutrient cycle that is already overloaded with day-to-day life from us. So number one thing you can do is stop feeding the geese. Let them be an animal, let them be wild, let them migrate the way that they're intended to. They don't, because they don't have to. They don't really have a natural reason to do it. They get food year-round here, they have shelter year-round here. Everybody and their brother from the
Yep.
country is moving into
And they
Horry
put
County, I
ponds
feel like,
everywhere.
these days. There's a reason for that. It's a great spot to be.
Stupid.
So, number one, enforcement is gonna be key. I think we learned last year there's an ordinance against feeding the geese. Is it in Surfside particular, or is it Horry County as a whole?
I don't know about Ori, but I know we have.
Okay, so there
Of course
already
you do.
is an ordinance against it, really
Wonderful.
bringing up that enforcement key, making sure that we are following the rules that we have set in place, we being the collective again. And that's everything, it's bread, it's seeds, it's pellets. There is plenty of food for these guys. I mean, look at all the golf courses. There's plenty of food that they're able to find on their own. They don't need us to feed them. They're not a cat, they're not a dog. They're not pets, they are wild, and they should be able to be a wild animal.
Should be able to walk around.
So number
Yep.
2, I bring up the golf courses, habitat modifications. One of their preferred food options is grass. They're herbivores, so they come through and they pick from the very top of the grasses. They love short grass. One of the easiest things you can do, y'all aren't gonna like it, let your grass grow a little bit taller. Unfortunately, it's really tall. 7 to 14 inches is preferred. Yeah. In the front yard, in the backyard, that's probably not gonna happen. But in spots like vacant lots, places where we're waiting for the Bojangles to get built, but it hasn't yet, letting that grass get up tall is an option. We'll get into some of the other stuff here in a second, but any chance you can to reduce your turf grass, it reduces that food source that's encouraging them to stay so much longer. B, from an environmental standpoint all the way around, turf grass doesn't have a huge benefit. It's not a native grass species to South Carolina. Our Bermudas, our centipedes, they're not a natural grass species that you would find. We have bunch grasses, we have several others. The turf grass that we have doesn't have deep roots, so it doesn't contribute to erosion prevention. Well, that's kind of the biggest thing about it, is that it really has such a shallow root system that we do lose a lot more to erosion. The other side of that too is that it requires a lot more nutrients, or at least different nutrients, than what our native grasses. We're in a sandy soil area. A lot of these grasses are not always intended to grow in a sandy soil area. That is why we have to do things like fertilize it. That's why we have to do things like lime it. We have a high acidic soil base because, look around, we have pines. We don't have a winter. Pines barely
Thank
use their
goodness.
leaves is the joke that
Yeah.
is buried in there badly. It all just left my head. Acidic soil, sand. Yeah, so it needs a lot different nutrient balance than what we already have in our soil. We're having to add fertilizers. If we do it before a rain, i.e. today, it all washes downstream. It builds up that nutrient level. So it all kind of connects in the end. A plus if we could reduce any amount of turf grass, even in just abandoned lots. Like I said, geese are grazers. Their favorite foods are going to be things like grasses, aquatic weeds, and grains. Another easy opportunity in here is in our stormwater ponds, making sure that they are maintained. If we're seeing aquatic weed outbreaks, things like hydrilla, things like down the Santee Cooper River system, we have a bad problem with giant salvinia. It's a weed that's absolutely taken over. I don't know that it's too much of a problem here, especially with the salt water, but several other aquatic weeds. What's that one? Spike rush that's all over the place. Any kind of the weeds that are, if you look at it and call it scummy, those are the ones that we want to try and control. Those are the ones that are not adding almost any benefit to a stormwater pond. And they do enjoy grains, so you don't want to put your grainy grasses around a pond edge. We talked about erosion. So this is a turf grass issue. You can see how the roots on this turf grass are less than half an inch deep. I mean, it's not holding on to anything. It's not really saving much. And as these geese get in and out of the water, they're not jumping out of the water. They're not flying out of the water. They have the ability, but they're a big bird. It takes a lot of energy for them to get up and over something. So they're gonna walk in and out. And it's just like at the beach. We don't walk on the dunes because it's mostly sand. Our soil is mostly sand, and it does lead to a lot of erosion issues. Erosion. Biggest issues with erosion, sedimentation, where the sand particles, where the clay, if we're far enough inland, particles get in the water system, leads to cloudy water, impacts water quality all the way down the system. If the water's too sedimented, fish can't breathe in it, gets caught up in their gills, they can actually suffocate. It can lead to property loss. If you have waterfront property, you get a lot of erosion. Eventually, 2-3 years down the road, your, for instance, 10-foot backyard turns into a 7-foot backyard. You don't get compensated any one way or the other for that land loss, and it's very hard to put back. The only thing stronger than the human will is water. You can't tell it what to do. And it leads to a lot of other water quality problems where heavy metals that are trapped up in the sediment can get introduced into the water systems. All in all, we really do try to reduce erosion as much as possible. Easy way to do that is by doing a shoreline buffer. A shoreline buffer, really fancy way to say we landscape the edge of the pond. It can be something that people either kind of love or hate, depending on how you feel about plants. It can be a very cheap option. What we say to start out with, to see if it's something you want to do, is incorporate a no-mow zone, a spot where you're not mowing up to the water's edge. If you can do 15 feet, that's awesome. If you can do 10 feet, I'll settle for that. But letting the grasses, if you leave it a lot, sometimes some briars will come up, but letting that stuff come up naturally is a really cost-effective way to instill a buffer. They have several benefits, one of which being that they are a literal net for anything that's going to wash into the pond. So while going back to the whole goose idea, it is a visual barrier for them when they're in the pond. They're a prey animal. They're herbivores. Their food doesn't run away from them. But they are a prey animal, so they're sitting on the water. They're always on the lookout, looking for the next predator. They don't look for gators very well. Those are beneath them. But they are looking at the pond edge. They're looking for anybody who's on the bank. Could that be a gator, dog, coyote, a large cat? They're always on the lookout. If they can't see out of the pond to the edge, if they can't see what's coming, they're less comfortable being in that spot. I'll get to there is no one solution to everything. It is a combined approach. But for the goose, that's why these buffers work, because it's that visual barrier for them, and it's an access barrier. When it is real thick, like in this picture here, like I said, they tend to walk in and out of a pond. They're not trying to jump. If they're a heavy bird, it takes a lot of energy for them to get up and over. They're gonna walk in and out. That's thick. Animals are lazy. Deer follow trails for a reason. Geese do the same thing. They're going to look, if they can't find a spot that's easy, they likely, I can't make promises, but they likely will move to another pond that's easier for them to go to. There was a pond when we did our first workshop down in Charleston. They had a grade A example of how a buffer completely moved the geese from that pond to the one down the road that did not have the buffer. kicks the can down the road a little bit, but it was a really great example of how a buffer
This is
does work.
stupid. This is
Um,
stupid. From one
Other
person to
benefits
another.
though with it is that it's that net, it's gonna catch everything from trash, McDonald's cups, napkins, cigarette butts, you name it, as it washes in, it gets tangled up in the plants, it gets stopped from getting in the water system, gets stopped from getting into the beach further down the road. It also catches nutrients, so this is something especially in stormwater ponds and neighborhood ponds, we really encourage people to do because we see a marked reduction in the amount of nutrients that do build up in that pond. They have less aquatic weed issues, they have less sedimentation issues, and these plants that we're allowing to grow on the bank are not turf grass. They're gonna be ideally aquatic plants with deep root systems. So they're going to hold on to that soil a lot better, reduce that erosion, reduce that soil loss for years down the road. The cost could be anywhere from free, stop mowing, then you don't have to pay the landscaping crews much, kind of saves you money, all the way to if you want to cultivate and you want it to be perfectly aesthetic, we have a list of native plants that are good for shoreline activities. You can filter for things like good for pollinators, deer resistant, pretty blooms in straight sun on a Wednesday. You can filter it down pretty good. We've combined our, it used to be called the Carolina Plant Yards Plant Database. We've combined it with the South Carolina Native Plant Society for the Native Plant Directory. It's the exact same idea. You can filter it by soil type, you can filter it by pH, you can filter it by sunlight, you name it, it has the options. You can look for purple blooms if that's what you want. And it gives you a list of native plants. Like I said, the great benefit there, they're native, they're used to our soils, they're designed to grow in our soils, so they don't need the constant maintenance that a lot of our introduced landscape plants will need. The other benefit is that they're wet feet plants, so they're designed to tolerate the ebb and flow of the water. They're designed to tolerate the periodic flooding that we do see in these stormwater systems. And it's a really great way to help things like the hummingbirds and the butterflies that everybody does like to see also. So always the big question is how wide do we want to be? Again, in my perfect world, in ideal tansy land, they're 25 feet. I've given up. If you can do a 14, it's great. I'll settle for 10 feet. We can flip a coin and I'll let you win for 6 foot. Just something, and again, when it comes to geese, the biggest thing is gonna be that visual barrier. Put yourself in a canoe or a kayak, sit on top of the water surface, and if you can see the bank, you want it to be a little bit further. Yeah. All right, so moving on. All right, plants are a hard no. My HOA will never agree to that. There's a catastrophic loss in the native plant livestock group, something like that. You can go into something like fencing. Downsides, fencing is really ugly. Another downside is that you do have installation and maintenance costs with it, but it works really well, especially when you're beginning to put in that buffer area. When the plants are young, they're very vulnerable. Everything eats the small, really soft plants. So even when you do install a buffer, putting something like an exclusion fencing around it is something that you can do to help ensure the success of it. The two examples that I have here are wire fencing. Not the most aesthetic. The one on the right is just gonna be a walking in and out barrier. It'll stop the geese. Again, in theory, they could go under it if they tried really hard. They could go over it if they tried really hard. Typically, they'll move on to something a little bit easier. The one on the left is, we'll call it aerial fencing. And it's a grid that goes over the top, and that way when they're coming in to fly, you tie flags onto it so that they can see it. We're not trying to trick them, we're not trying to trap them, we're not trying to, hurt them, canoodle them or anything like that. don't think that's the right word there, but we're not trying to trick them in any way. We want them to see the fence. They come in for a landing, they say, oh, never mind, and they'll go somewhere else. South Carolina has a ton of stormwater ponds. I used to be able to tell you a rough number. That was 4 or 5 years ago now, and we've probably tripled in that. We have a lot of ponds that they can go to. We have a lot of natural river systems that they should go to. Encouraging them to go on is still the goal here. When we do the exclusion fencing, if you do the wire fencing, you can either use monofilament, so like fishing line, use a heavier weight fishing line, or wire, depends on what your budget is and how heavy you want to move things. Wire can add up in weight a lot easier than fishing line does. You can use electrified wire in spots where people travel or where a lot of pets are. You want a lot of signage. You want to make it very clear, do not touch this wire. And you do want to be careful.
Nice.
Electricity and
Beautiful.
water don't mix
Fucking
super
nice.
well.
She
So
didn't
you
have
want to
that
include
last
warning
year.
signs. You want to make sure that it is above that high water mark. Last thing we need is a rainstorm like this coming up and shorting out the system or worse. Usually this exclusion fencing is temporary. It's taken down in the fall and the winter, and then it's put up about now, right when the Bradford pears start to bloom. Love that for us. That's today, by the way, I noticed that. Once those start to bloom, we put the fences up, leave it in through the summer, through their nesting period, and then you can take it down. Unfortunately, it's also when we want everything to be the prettiest, when everybody's coming to visit. I think y'all stay busy year round anymore though. The trick here is you want the wire in tight rows, close enough so that they're not squeezing through. So if they're tight, there's no flex between the wires, and they have a harder time squeezing through it. The goslings, they kind of do what they want, but they're not gonna go too far from mom and dad. They're gonna stick by the big geese. Heavy monofilament. All right, so if you do a 2-line fence, so if you do just 2 strings, you want them 6 inches apart, 6 inches off the ground, and then 6 inches to the next one. Again, this is really great during their flightless period. They can't jump. Their kneecaps, not very good. So it'll stop them when installed appropriately. If you do a 3-line fence, you want them either 5 inches apart, just 5, 10, 15, or the top 2 you want 5 inches apart, and then the top one you can stretch 6 or 7 inches. If you're worried about people seeing it, you want it to be pretty, especially along roadways where there's not a lot of foot traffic. Green or black wire can be used. Same concept with a chicken coop. You paint the wire dark color so that you can see your birds easier. Same with this, when it's a darker line, you don't see it as well. Highly don't recommend this anywhere where there's foot traffic. You don't want anybody tripping. You can put signs on it. You can put whatever you want on it. The signs aren't going to affect the efficacy of it. The birds aren't going to see the sign and go, there's a fence there. The fence is still there. That's what's stopping them. So you can put all the signage that you need or want around there. If the wire fencing is not really your speed, but you do want to do something short term, if you really want to go ugly, you can do the, orange construction fencing. It works. Again, it's that physical barrier. There is no squeezing through that. The trick here is to make sure that you're A, installing it, B, maintaining it. Bored kids like to tear it up sometimes. Don't know how often that happens here, but where I'm from in Charleston, it was like a weekly occurrence. And if it does get broken, you do want to make sure that none of those pieces are getting left behind when we do take up the fence. You'll see in this picture, it is installed very close to the water's edge. You want it to be right above that high water line. You don't want there to be a lot of space in between, because those birds are able to fly. They can fly in, they'll walk, they'll take up, a 2-3 foot space. They'll make that home and they'll turn it into a mud pit all the way around the edge. So you do want it as close to the water as possible so they lose that egress and ingress. They lose that walking in and out ability. They lose that nice grassy area. This is, again, mostly effective May through July when birds are flightless, but it is very labor intensive. You do have to have people putting in the fence, taking out the fence, maintaining the fence, and paying for the fence. So, something to keep in mind. And if you really like the idea of fencing, but you hate the idea of labor every single year, there is permanent fencing options. You can do something as simple as a picket fence. As long as the spokes are a couple inches close together, you're gonna do good. A 3-4 foot fence is gonna be plenty. Again, you want it close to that water's edge, so you wanna make sure that it's something that's not going to rot if we do get a lot of standing water long term. The other option that was, depending on what you like, this hog paneling fence, the country wire fence, what you could call it, is another great option. If the squares are gonna be 6 inches, you know, the adult birds aren't gonna squeeze through that. It would be a great option. Again, this is a great spot for the retention ponds that are along the sides of the highways, where nobody is spending a lot of time, and great spots in areas where you need something permanent. Biggest downside to this is that there is a high initial cost. Long term, you could see some benefits because you're not having the maintenance issues, but that's something y'all can debate later. There are additional control measures outside of not feeding them and outside of the fencing options. Prior to nesting season, harassment is legal. During nesting season, harassment is still legal, it's just not effective. They get very defensive during nesting season. They're gonna stay there. Before that, when they first start to come in, if it's a spot that's not quiet and it's not comfortable, they're not gonna choose to raise their goslings in that area. Harassment is things like noisemakers. In airports, they use giant air cannons. Not a realistic option here. But things like, I mean, I've seen people use Billy Bass, the singing bass on the wall, mounting that on a tree. It's motion activated. I have people use it for deer and hogs as well too. They hear the singing, it freaks them out. Remote control boats, you can chase them. Geese are protected. The one thing you cannot ever do is harm, molest, or come in contact with them without a permit.
Right.
So if you're using remote control boats, chase them. You can't hit them. That's the rule.
But you can with a car.
You can chase them with
Yeah.
kayaks and canoes if you want. Again, the thing to remember is if they're in stormwater ponds are essentially sewage treatment facilities. They're disgusting. If you want to get ringworm, go swim in a retention pond. So that's something to consider before you put yourself in a kayak in one of these ponds. If it's a recreational pond, have at it. I think that's it for the harassment that I wanted to touch on. Kind of a combination of harassment and visual deterrent is gonna be the wacky inflatable arm guys. It looks ridiculous, but they freak animals out, and they do work, especially when used in combination with other things. Other visual deterrents, there's some success in using fake coyotes, the predator models using fake coyotes, using the fake owls. The trick with those, and the reason that they almost never work when you put the owl on the beach house porch, is because they have to move. Animals aren't dumb. They're very smart. That's how they survive. And the 3rd, 4th, 5th time they come by and Larry the owl hasn't moved, they start to figure out that Larry's not real. So you do want to move these every 3 to 4 days. If you can move them every other day, that's ideal. And I call them shiny moving things as a highly technical term for something as simple as pie pans. Pie pans, I've used strips of aluminum foil, Mylar tape, anything that's shiny and moves in the wind, you can put up. We've had to do that before in our garden to get the crows from eating the corn. It works, again, short term. These are things that you could do 1 year, and then the next year you're gonna have to switch up your method. And that's with all of these. You don't do one option, you use a combination. Anytime you do one thing over and over and over, you lose the effectiveness of it. So it's something that every year you want to come with a combined approach, and you do have to revisit, is this still working this year? Have we done this 2 years in a row? Is it time to switch things up? there's something else with harassment, but I can't remember what it was. Once you get past those, you say, look, we've done this multiple years in a row, it's not working, we need to do something that's gonna require a permit. Something that's gonna require a permit is gonna be anything that involves removing, harming, or coming in contact, physical contact with the geese or their nests. Nest destruction is allowable through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service with registration. You can't take the golf club from the garage and go out anytime you want. That's not legal, and it's not effective at all. They'll just make a new nest. They're very resilient. It's not ethical to do in any way, shape, or form either. They have a very specific method that they prefer that you follow. There is additional information from that, both on U.S. Fish and Wildlife's website and on South Carolina Department of Natural Resources website. There is a system to follow to make sure that you're not A, wasting your time, and B, doing things that are not ethical. We do want to be responsible in everything that we do. We don't do things for fun. So if you do need to do, if you want to try the nest destruction techniques, you have to apply for that, or you have to register on U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The website for that is on the screen. You can also Google U.S. Fish and Wildlife nest destruction, and it is the first thing that comes up. You can probably just type in U.S. FWS Goose, and it'll be one of the first options on there. Second, South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, or DNR, they do have a Canada Goose depredation permit. You have to apply for it, and it is not something that's given to anybody regardless of anything. You have to prove, and that's what the screenshot is, on the application, they want to see that you have taken previous actions to alleviate the damage. If this is your first time going to them, your first time acknowledging that there's a problem, you're not going to get a permit for any type of depredation. You're going to get told, go try something else. So they have a checkbox list. Have you tried harassment? Ah, that's what it was. Chemical repellents. There are chemical repellents on the market. They are basically nasty tasting, or really, I can't say spicy because birds don't taste spice, but it's the same effect. It makes their mouth uncomfortable. They don't like it, unlike us. We like spicy things somehow. Terrible method for jalapenos. The one that is most common is a grape-based chemical. You put it out, it makes the grass, for lack of a better term, spicy. They choose not to eat it, they move on. The downsides to it, A, it's a product, it's a chemical product, it's expensive, sorry. And we live in a really wet state. Best time to put this out, spring. It has to be reapplied every time it rains. So that's the same problem that a lot of our farmers have with chemical repellents for deer. It's on the market. It's not realistic to use in most situations, but in the right situation, it could be an option. So I wanted to make sure that I did mention it. Don't know any brand names. And that was the other harassment part. I did come across some products today. They have like a really basic name. It's like Go Away Goose or something. But it's a light. Some of them will float on top of the water. Some of them you mount on land. It totes that it can go, you can put it anywhere where you're having problems. And it basically emits a flash every couple of seconds that goes 100 feet. I feel like it's feet. 100 yards would be excessive. But it puts out a flash at night. It's a solar powered system, and it causes a visual disturbance to the goose so that they don't want to stay there overnight. So it helps to encourage them to move along. So that's something that I did come across today. I thought it was worth mentioning. Have not looked into any of the research behind it, besides the fact that I know geese don't like lights. Lasers are something that can be used to move them along also. I don't like to encourage people to do that because strong lasers are highly regulated, and I don't know that the weak lasers work as well. The other things that the permit requires is stuff like, is the damage currently occurring, a ballpark number of geese currently on the property, a description of the damage. If you come in with the description of the damage and you say, I don't like them, that's not sufficient. You've gotta come up with actual data, you know, hey, we have shoreline erosion, we have, we had 3 slip and fall accidents from, slipping on the poop last year. Stuff like that, having data to back up what you're asking. Other things on there is habitat alteration, exclusion, visual deterrence, basically showing that this isn't your first shot at this, that you have tried other things.
How about just leave
The other,
Yeah.
I'm forgetting everything with harassment. There are companies also that can do this. You can do it yourself, or you can hire it out. One of the kind of more innovative methods I've seen is you can train, they're usually border collies because they're smart. My mixed dog at home is not super smart, but they can train them to chase off the geese. Benefit of that is they're trained not to catch them, because again, once you are harming that animal, that is illegal. That is not ethical, that is not the goal.
Surfside,
But
it's not
if you're
illegal.
chasing them,
Yeah, exactly.
they're designed to, or they're trained to listen, shoo them off, with repeated effort. It is something that can work, especially when used in combination. If it's this one thing you do, don't expect them to not get used to it. They'll figure out pretty quick that the dogs aren't gonna actually catch them. And I do not recommend sending your Chihuahua after them. The Chihuahua would be more than willing to do so, but that goes both ways. Geese are not as afraid of Chihuahuas as we are, and you should be very afraid of a Chihuahua. Very afraid. I've had several, I can tell you this. Key takeaways from tonight is animals as a whole, lazy, just like people. They're gonna take the path of least resistance. If you make them work for the goal, if you make them work for their reward, a lot of the times they're gonna move on. Crows could be the exception there, but we don't have, this meeting isn't about crows, it's about geese. Every pond in every neighborhood is different. What works in Sunshine Estates may not work in the Crown of Surfside. Every pond, every neighborhood is gonna be different based on A, the tolerance level, B, the actual situation, the size of the pond, the proximity to other ponds. There's 1,000 different scenarios or 1,000 different aspects that go into this. But most ponds, and I could change that to every pond, is going to require integrated pest management or those multiple approaches. It's not gonna be a Band-Aid fix, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and it's not a, we're gonna do it in 2026 and we don't have to revisit till 2030. It's gonna be an every year thing, multiple seasons of the year to address almost continually. So, that being said, do y'all have any goose or stormwater related questions that I can do my best to either answer or capture? Yes, ma'am.
One of my neighbors told me, I don't know if this is true, that if you put up even a little garden fence, they will not go over it.
Especially during the flightless period, so early summer, think June. Yes. If you're going, especially 6 inches, go a foot or taller and you'll see a marked difference. You go 2-3 feet, yes, for sure.
Okay.
So I think what I'm hearing is the only options really we have is the county spend a lot, the Surfside spend a lot of money on these buffers around the ponds. We spend a lot of money on fencing or shiny things and deterrence. And we kind of wall ourselves in and just have all these geese. So it doesn't really sound like a solution to having tons of geese in our yard. And I wonder, are there any studies done about the erosion and the bacterial effect on already that's happening here?
Specific, so I'll address the research aspect first. Specific to Surfside, not that I'm aware of.
They have the water quality monitoring program is here, and that's through CCU. And I think they've been monitoring the water for at least 5 to 10 years. So they have historical data.
And then nationwide or coastal wide, large scale, there is that research that I'm sure we can drum up pretty easily and make available.
Excuse me, other than the fact that they're.
Give me 1 second. I'm gonna answer the other part of hers.
Okay.
The one other thing that I did wanna say is the buffers don't have to be a huge financial investment. Like I said, the easiest thing to do is just create that no-mow zone, where you have an area that you're just not going to mow periodically throughout the year and let it grow tall.
That's,
you
how,
can-
how long would that take to happen?
Yeah, a couple weeks, couple months.
What
happens when you don't cut the grass?
The water's ponds, to grow that up and have it be a buffer would be how long?
You could do it within a year. The grass grows pretty quickly, especially around a stormwater pond, because it is such a nutrient-rich environment. You think you're mowing your grass at the height of the season, I feel like sometimes you gotta do it twice a week almost.
So
No.
more than likely it would have to be mandated, right? I don't see people doing it voluntarily in their,
We have some success
Water
with
view.
neighborhoods that do it. Some do it voluntarily, some have to be mandated by the HOA, it's all location dependent.
okay.
So, Grand Dunes in Cipriana Park in Grand Dunes, they have on all of their stormwater ponds a no-mow zone. That's about 5 to 10 foot wide. But the HOA manages all of those ponds. But if you wanted to plant rather than the no-mow zone, the plants really aren't expensive. They're about $5 to $10. They're much less expensive than a nursery plant that you would get.
And a lot of them do grow from fragments. That's kind of the bear that we deal with a lot of our aquatic vegetation, is that if you rake it out and you leave a fragment behind, it multiplies. So a lot of these, they have a habit of filling in on their own.
Okay.
I had another really great thought that was in there, and it's gonna come to me in a little bit. All right, yes, ma'am.
No, I was saying, other than the fact that obviously they're birds, animals, and people don't wanna hurt them, why are they so protected? When I moved here, I thought it was because they were endangered. Then I found out it's because they're migratory birds. They're not migrating anymore, and we, the people, can't walk on our grass, can't walk on anything. I have a dog, but they can't walk their dogs or do anything, so people are being seriously affected by this, and the answer is to put up fences and to put up, like, there doesn't seem to be an answer for our world.
So genetically, there's no difference between the residential Canada geese and the migratory Canada geese.
Don't move here.
Physiologically,
Yeah.
besides the fact that their diet is different and they're less conditioned for long flight, there's nothing actually stopping them from migrating, besides they figured out that they're in a vacation town.
But there's deer hunting season, there's turkey hunting season, I hate to
You
be
live in a
horrible, but
vacation
there are all
area.
these things, so,
There is
You
a
live
goose
in a
season,
vacation area. We've got vacationers here that feed.
She's answering.
Yeah, we have a goose season in South Carolina. The kind of tricky part of it is that when we get into residential areas, there is no hunting. So that's something that in deer wise, we run into the same problem, and that's the $1.5 million question these days.
I guess that's when you're saying to the roundups, that you have to get the permit to do roundups, cause I've heard of roundups been done at certain times.
Aren't you a
when
sweet
they
lady?
can't fly.
Right, that is, once you've tried these other options, sometimes that could be the solution.
Ms. Belkin, if I can interrupt for a second, I believe they're also protected by international treaties. To go back to like the early 1900s, if I remember.
Yeah, there's only a small section of birds,
Mm.
less than 15 species that are not considered, of the migratory species that are not protected. So it's a long-standing established, protection with a short-term, this, residential goose problem began happening in about, the 80s. So it's very short-term, in the grand scheme of things, and something that we're really, in the last 10 years, have acknowledged is something that is gonna need future addressing.
So, and if I'm not mistaken, it's international treaties, and I think in the US, it's managed by the US Fish and Wildlife Service, who in turn turns over state management to the individual state DNRs and so forth. So that's why we need a DNR permit.
Correct.
Okay, but that's why they're protected
Yeah,
and why we can only do so much.
yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, I mean, I'm not an expert in all that, but I know I've looked it up, and for those that wonder why they're protected, because there are a million of them, millions of them.
So
Okay.
at the last official, population count that we were able to find, it was 50,000, residential, and that was in 2019.
In what
And-
space?
South Carolina, coastal South Carolina. So, but again, that was what, Matt, 7 years ago now, and I don't know when the research was actually done for that population. Yes, ma'am.
What's the difference between residential and migrating birds?
Whether they stay or leave.
Oh, well,
That's
No.
they just decided.
Yep,
They
yep,
like it here.
yep.
But they're all staying now.
A lot of them do migrate. Like the Canada goose population is doing significantly well, both in residential and migratory populations. They're one of our few water fowl that are thriving because they're such generalists, really. So yeah, really the difference is just as simple as whether they stay or go. Probably diet plays into a factor. You know, they're not conditioned like the migratory birds are, so it is harder for them to make the long distance, and I'm not running a marathon because I'm not conditioned to it. Can't really blame them for not trying, because I'm not trying to run a marathon. Yes, ma'am.
What do you recommend as the best strategies our town could employ to stop people from feeding the geese? If that is a big issue that we have, and, you know, we have our ordinance little sign, but that doesn't seem to be curtailing the feeding. What strategies do you recommend?
What we generally see is once there is enforcement behind the sign,
Stop having
that's
bird
when we
feeders.
see the behavior change.
Stop having vacations.
Several municipalities, universities, it's like having an open sign on a door, open or push and pull sign. People don't read signs very often until they have to, until you sit there and you pull on a push door and you stop and you look. Once there's that enforcement behind the sign, that's really when we see the behavior change. Yes, ma'am.
I have fewer geese in my yard now. We had used to feed the birds with bird feeders and everything, and we had a lot of geese, and so did all our neighbors. Well, we had a problem with rats, so we had to stop feeding the birds, and there are a lot fewer geese.
This is true.
And I was so sad to stop feeding them, because I love them, but, you know, who wants the rats and the geese?
I do.
This is true. I'll do 2 more questions. We're at 7:01 right now, or 7:02 right now, so, yes, sir.
I've got one quick one that I think you can explain, and then
I love
just
that.
a couple of regular ones.
All right.
Can you define flightless period for me? You
Yeah.
seem to use that. They birds, they got
Really?
wings. I'm struggling
Really?
with flightless.
They go through a molt period in early summer, so
Okay.
January, February, March, April, May, mid-May through mid-July, beginning of August, they lose their flight feathers. So they go through a molt period where they are significantly reduced in their ability to
Clearly
get up
he's
and
done
over.
his
They can do,
research.
Okay.
excuse me, glide, but they cannot get up and over.
All right, so then that during that flightless period, if they weren't down here and fat and happy, where would they normally be during their flightless period? Would they be in the south, or would they be back up in Canada?
Probably be a little bit further down south. They
Further
naturally
south.
migrate, yeah.
They'd be in Florida.
They would be in,
Wow.
they'd be some Florida, some Georgia, some South Carolina,
Yeah.
just not in as heavy concentrations as we see.
Okay.
The keys.
All right, so then the question I have is, looking at our resident happy geese, there are a bunch of them with messed up wings.
Yep.
And I'm looking at it like,
Yep.
did a dog attack that goose, or
Bread.
did it get shot?
Bread. Bread. The
Let
vacationers
her
feeding them
answer. Let him
bread.
speak and let him answer. Him speak and her answer, sorry.
One of the causes from that is bread. It's a condition called angel wing. It's
Okay.
a nutrient deficiency.
Yeah.
All right, so it's feeding them,
Yeah,
all right.
The wrong
Alright.
food.
You don't do that.
And
That's rude.
And so, the question is, the geese have babies,
Look at me.
goslings or whatever. So if you got a resident fat and happy goose, and he has a baby goose, is the baby goose gonna fly the heck out of here, or is he gonna stick around? So it's just perpetual, it's like, well, it's
It's like
Goose
humans.
welfare, they're just.
It's
they're
a
dependent state,
snowballing
and they just
problem,
keep
yeah.
on
They
sticking
have
around.
very high site fidelity, so they'll try to come back to the area, if
Where
not
they
the
were
same
born.
spot that they hatched.
Yeah,
My stalker.
alright.
Look at that guy. Staring at me.
Can we have a few questions here? Do you mind if council asks a few?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll let you pull up the chat. While she does that, y'all want
Okay.
He's talking about you.
I was
I know.
interested if you had any information on the use of bird control.
That's the boob man that kept stalking my house.
To my knowledge,
This thing's
it's not
foggy.
currently being used, I know that. I can't remember if it's been tried. If it has, it was not successful, I'll say that. But I could look into and get you some data on that.
Well, I'd like to know about, you say the barriers around the lakes, the grass around the lakes. How about rocks? Does rocks deter from going into the lakes and all? Like if you as a resident lived on the lake and you wanted to put rocks in, wouldn't that help a lot?
It does help. We call the rocks riprap in the stormwater world. But yeah, it's because it's an uncomfortable surface. It's rocky. Especially when they don't lock together really well, it's uncomfortable. So municipalities have seen some success with that, especially when used with other methods. But yes, that is an option.
So if we keep them out of the water, would they still lead town then? Or are we just gonna keep them out of the water into our yards?
They need water. They're an aquatic bird. How much water is the trick? If they don't have access to ponds, they will not stay in an area. If they have access to enough water nearby, kiddie pools, stuff like that, they could be enticed to stay. They will not be thriving, and there wouldn't be enough to support a population that way. All of that to say yes and no.
So let's drain all
If
the
you do it in
ponds.
small term,
There
neighborhood
we
A
go.
does it, it'll push them to neighborhood B. But if we can get the community on board, we can get large areas on board, then that's when we see that change happen.
One more question. How many hatchlings or goslings do they usually have?
Stupid idiot. Joke.
Numbers.
48.
I believe it's around 6 to 12. They will re-nest if they need to, but once they have a successful nest, they will only raise that brood. They will adopt others. They will happily take on, you'll see a trail of 30, 40 goslings behind a couple. But they themselves, typically, I go with the 6 to 12.
And that means for everyone that we got here, most likely they're gonna have 12 more. that just
Yeah, the
stay
males,
on board.
males deliver eggs too.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my
Things
god.
like raccoons, coyotes, house cats, all do impact that.
Oh, got a bunch of.
For life, they'll go for life until they're
Stupidest question yet.
Hee haw, it's Gomer Pyle.
in captivity. They live 30 or more years. Wild animals live.
Oh my
less.
god.
It's wild cat or a feral cat lives a much shorter life than a house cat. Same principle behind that.
Okay, I have a few questions. If we try to do, if a resident says, I'm gonna do a no-mow zone, if the neighbor really doesn't do anything, right?
Right.
So it's going to have to be comprehensive around the entire boundaries of the lakes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for the town to be effective, we would basically have to enact an ordinance of a no-mow zone.
If you were doing it on a town scale,
Oh, they'll do that, but they won't have one
Sometimes
to
by
not run them over.
What will the town do? I mean, if that's what people want, we can look at something like that.
Oh, it's what the
That
people
gets
want?
into individual property rights and so on and so forth, and
That's a new one.
all of a sudden, people aren't as supportive as maybe they were at first, but that's the stuff I wanna get to. I sometimes hear people say, it's wildlife, they were here first. Not true, correct? Geese, since the 80s maybe?
we've had migratory geese have come through
Sure.
for forever. We've seen the rise in the residential geese since, I think it's mid-80s,
Okay.
is, when we've started noticing the trend.
And the fact that the vast majority of the water, the ponds around here are not natural, they're man-made, also goes along with, they weren't here because there was no pond there.
They didn't have as much habitat. We
Right, so-
created it.
I mean, they were in Waccamaw maybe,
Mhm.
and they can be there fine, you know, smile. You can't do it in this environment.
So funny.
That's what, yeah. Okay, so, yeah, I mean, again, I think we have to do the no feeding and enforcement, that would be the other thing the town can really do.
Yep. Easiest, lowest hanging fruit right there.
Okay. That's all I have. Does anybody else have any other questions for, we'll go back to once. I guess, are you need to wrap up soon, or?
I do, I have to go get my kid from the babysitter.
I understand, and congratulations.
Good.
Thank you.
So, first time?
Yes,
She had her first child a few months ago?
yeah, it's 4 months.
Which is why we didn't do this a couple months earlier. I was trying to set this up before Christmas, and she goes, well, there's a problem.
Yes, I am occupied.
So, okay, I understand if you have to go, but, I want to, as the question and answer period ends, I wanna move to the public comment. If you can stay, because you may help us with some things they tell us, but if you have to go, that's fine, Joe. I have no problem with that. So I'm gonna open it up to public comment now. And when you do, come on up here, well, it doesn't really matter about the microphone, yeah. So if anybody wants to make a public comment, feel free. Just come on up and, identify yourself. We do still want that
This
for the
guy's an
record.
asshole.
Where you live.
No,
Name and
this
address.
guy's an asshole.
Jeff Wells, 415 Fifth Avenue South. I just wanted, I've been battling these geese forever, you know? They're a nuisance.
Battling?
They have lots of bacteria, that they feces all over the streets all the time. You have certain people that wanna feed them and or let them in the house, that's their own thing. But you're not supposed to do that for wildlife. And if there's an ordinance for this town, I wish they would go ahead and enforce it. Because I speak for a lot of neighbors, and we're just sick of it.
We're sick
And
of
every
you.
time, springtime, you see tons of these gooselings and hatchlings, or whatever. and it just-
Goslings, you idiots.
30 of them, you know, every spring it gets worse and worse and worse. And it's because we allow people, the town allows people to feed them and for people to have inappropriate interactions with wildlife. That's all I want to say.
Thank you.
You're so wrong.
Not
right. You're so wrong. Wrong.
You're the ones that.
Be civil, and please don't engage. I wanna ask a question, for you folks. Is other interaction illegal, unlawful? Hurting? Trying to
Hurting.
manage traffic control, things like that?
Traffic, though, that's me. You're talking about me.
You start to run the line of where is harassment. Exactly where that line is gonna be a question for DNR to answer.
But I mean, if you were trying to essentially herd them,
Hurt them.
not to harass, to
Right.
protect.
Right.
But that still is considered potentially harmful to them? and
To
could be
protect them is
illegal?
harmful.
If they're in the street,
It depends
Don't
on where
interrupt
that
now.
line is. I don't know how
Maybe.
DNR defines it.
All right, thank you.
It could be interaction, it could be physical contact.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but, okay. Any other, did you want to address something?
That's his game
I just
plan.
wanted to say something about, Mr. Wells, but he left, but I will say, 'cause
Good.
it might be of interest to others. Enforcement of ordinances is not just a town problem. It's also a court problem. You have to have a court that will stand behind the town. That might not always be the case, so you all might wanna start paying more attention to the judges you elect. Just a thought.
And the people we elect.
Judges,
Okay, any other public comment?
I have just a.
Please come on up. Name and address.
Becky Harps, 511 Third Avenue North. I would just have a question. Is it necropsy when they check what happened to the to the dead animal. Is there any idea, any way to identify the shape of any bacteria in them, within them?
Oh my god.
Yeah, bacteria can be identified down to the cellular level, so.
We had a dog that was really, really sick, and they eat the goose poop, I'm sorry, and got really sick. And the vet just could not believe sonograms.
They don't even go in her yard.
It kind of looked like sperm just flying around in his belly, and it grew and grew and grew and just overwhelmed his stomach. So I was just curious to see.
I'm not sure on that
It's
one, how,
worms.
they would be able to
Any
get it to
dog
the
can get
species specific
worms.
where it came from.
Lying bitch. She never has one goose in her yard, not one. She never has one goose in her yard.
Any other public comment?
I'm Mary Martin from South Florida Drive.
They want to
document everybody.
Mary Marr.
M-A-R. They want to document everybody.
I've lived here 26 years, right across from the pond.
She
at
deserves
9th
an
Avenue
award.
South. These geese have taken over my yard. I live across from the pond. I don't live on the pond. So what I'm hearing tonight, and I've tried the coyotes, I've tried the shiny things, I've tried everything. I've tried sprays on the lawn, which all worked for a while. But this has got to be a town-managed problem. We need people, because there are neighbors
But
who
with
feed
fence.
the geese. While I'm cleaning up their droppings from my driveway and can't walk my dog in my own yard because of the mouse, which she tries to eat. So I really pray for the council and the town as a whole to look at a way to manage this problem. I don't hate the geese.
Yeah.
When I first moved here, there were a few geese in that pond. It has only been a problem for me in my yard for the past maybe 3 or 4 years. But I came home the other day, there were 40 geese in my yard.
She must live on the south side.
So, again, it's just, it needs, I think,
I got it
a
recorded.
town solution. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Anyone else?
I'll give you mine.
Oh, we
Somebody
want-
stole my coyote, by the way.
That's an enforcement issue too, I guess.
I've got some things I gotta transfer to her, that's what we're working on.
Is it natural for 40 geese to be together?
Oh, is that
You.
me? Okay,
It's called a flock.
the flocks can be
you imagine
pretty
that?
large, so that's, yeah.
We have
That's
places
it.
where there are 40, 50, 60 geese sitting on someone's lawn.
There have been flocks of over 200.
Oh, no way.
Remember the other day I drove past the park.
Let's keep it,
I'm sorry.
yeah, it's not that kind of meeting. We don't interact back and forth, sorry, but that's the way we have to conduct these. Does anybody else want to make a public comment? All right, in that case, that is the last item on our agenda, so I will just ask for a motion for adjournment.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
All in favor? Aye, opposed, done. Motion carries.